Emma sat on her couch, the soft gray light of the rainy afternoon spilling through her window. Portland had that way of turning the world into a quiet, reflective place, and today it suited her mood perfectly. She wrapped her hands around a warm mug of tea, watching droplets race down the glass. Her apartment was small but cozy, filled with the scent of old books, a hint of lavender, and the faint aroma of her unfinished dinner from the night before. Loneliness had settled over her life like a thick, invisible blanket. She didn't remember when it had started, only that she'd grown accustomed to the silence, to the endless routine of work, home, and the occasional phone call she barely looked forward to answering. Her piano, a gift from her mother years ago, sat in the corner. Its polished surface reflected the dim light of the room, and the keys had yellowed slightly with age. She hadn't played much recently, caught in the slow grind of her days and the quiet ache of being alone. But today, on a sudden impulse, she lifted her fingers and pressed down on a key. The note was soft, almost hesitant, a small ripple breaking the stillness. One note became two, then a few more. Music filled the space she had been avoiding, and she felt a brief, fluttering sense of relief. Her loneliness didn't vanish, it wasn't so easily swept away but for a moment. The silence seemed less heavy. The rain tapped gently against the window, a rhythm that seemed to mirror her thoughts. She thought of the friends she hadn't seen in months, the birthdays she had quietly celebrated alone, the nights she had gone to sleep wishing anything would change. She had gotten used to the routine, but there was an emptiness she couldn't ignore, a sense that life was passing by outside her window while she remained still. Then came the doorbell, a sharp, unexpected sound that made her jump. She wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, she just stared at the door, heart racing, wondering if she should ignore it or pretend she wasn't home. Another chime, insistent but polite, pulled her from her thoughts. Reluctantly, she set her mug down, wiped her hands on her sweater, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, she saw a man standing there, holding an umbrella that was dripping rainwater onto the welcome mat. His coat was dark and his hair stuck slightly to his forehead, damp from the drizzle. But it was his smile, easy and genuine, that stopped her. It wasn't confident or flashy, it was simple, quiet, warm. Somehow, it felt like the first sunlight. After weeks of gray skies, "Hi, I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice steady and calm. "I just moved in across the hall and I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Luke." Emma hesitated. Words seemed to catch in her throat. She hadn't spoken to a stranger in months, hadn't invited anyone into her quiet, careful life. And yet, something about the way he looked at her, patient and friendly, made her chest lift with a sudden, unfamiliar curiosity. "Hi, I'm Emma," she replied, her voice soft but not trembling. She opened the door wider, stepping aside. Luke stepped in quickly, polite, and careful not to track water on her carpet. He looked around, taking in the small apartment with a subtle nod of appreciation. "This is nice," he said. "I like it. Cozy." Emma felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Thanks. I live here alone." Her words sounded dull, almost resigned, but she noticed he didn't recoil or judge. He smiled, and the expression seemed to say he understood without needing to comment. "I get that," he said simply. "I've moved around a lot, and being in a new place alone, well, it's not always easy." There was a pause, a quiet acknowledgement that both of them understood what it meant to feel separate from the world. "If you ever want someone to grab coffee with, or even just talk, I'd be happy to." Emma's heart skipped. She wasn't used to such openness, such unassuming kindness. It wasn't pressure, wasn't charm or flattery, was just a genuine offer of company. And that felt almost revolutionary. She nodded. I'd like that." They talked for a few minutes longer. Small talk about the weather, the building, and the best coffee shop in the area. Luke's laughter was easy, unforced, a sound that made Emma feel lighter than she had in months. She realized she was leaning slightly forward, listening intently, forgetting the monotony of her usual days. The conversation ended too quickly, and he had to leave to unpack boxes in his apartment. "See you around?" he asked, holding the door for her as she stepped back. "Yeah, see you," she replied. After the door closed, Emma leaned against it, heart still fluttering. It was absurd, she thought, how a simple introduction could stir so many feelings: curiosity, hope, nervous excitement. The room felt warmer somehow, less like a lonely shell and more like a place waiting for something. She walked over to the piano again and pressed a few keys, her fingers moving more confidently this time. Music flowed from her hands, soft and tentative, yet full of possibility. Over the next few days, Emma found herself thinking about Luke often. She caught herself smiling at the memory of his easy laugh, the tilt of his head, the quiet confidence that made him approachable. For the first time in a long time, she imagined the possibility of sharing her days with someone, not in a rush, not in a dramatic whirlwind, but in simple, human connection. Her routine began to shift subtly. She made an effort to walk down the hall more often, hoping to see him, even for a brief greeting. She lingered a little longer at the coffee shop where he said he liked to spend his mornings. Each encounter, however small, left her feeling lighter, as if someone had gently lifted a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. One rainy afternoon, she returned home to find a small note slipped under her door. Written in neat handwriting, it said simply, "Saw you at the cafe today. Hope the rain didn't ruin your day." Luke. Emma held the note to her chest, a warmth spreading through her. It was such a small gesture, yet it felt monumental. She placed it on the piano and sat down, letting her fingers wander over the keys. Music poured out of her, stronger this time, filled with emotion she hadn't felt in years. She played until the sun broke through the clouds outside, casting a golden light into her apartment. It was in that moment, playing under the soft glow of sunlight after a rainstorm, that Emma realized something profound. Loneliness didn't have to be permanent. She didn't know what the future held. Maybe Luke would become a friend. Maybe something more, but she felt alive again, aware of the possibilities life could offer. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. The days began to pass more quickly, filled with subtle anticipation. Emma noticed the small details in her environment, the way the light shifted across her walls, the sound of rain against the windows, the distant hum of the city. Everything seemed a little brighter, a little more significant. And always, in the back of her mind, was the memory of Luke's smile, the warmth of his voice, and the feeling that someone had stepped into her life in a way that mattered. One evening, as she was walking down the hallway to take out the trash, she saw him again. Luke was carrying a box of books, looking slightly frustrated with the struggle of balancing it. Emma rushed to help, and their hands brushed briefly as she steadied the box. The touch was fleeting but electric, leaving her heart racing. "Thanks," he said, smiling at her, slightly out of breath. "I think I'm going to need more practice moving in." Emma laughed softly, a sound that felt like it hadn't been heard in her apartment before. "I can imagine," she replied. "If you need help again, let me know." As they parted, Emma walked back to her apartment, her mind buzzing with the quiet thrill of connection. She realized, with a mix of awe and disbelief, that her life was slowly beginning to change. Loneliness had been her constant companion for so long that she hadn't recognized how much she had been craving someone, not just anyone, but someone who could see her, understand her, and make her feel less alone. Sitting at her piano that night, she allowed herself to play without restraint. Notes filled the room, rising and falling with the rhythm of her emotions. There was longing, yes, but also hope. Heartache, yes, but also excitement. And at the center of it all was a simple, undeniable truth. For the first time in years, Emma's life had a spark she hadn't known was possible, somewhere in the distance. The rain continued to fall, a quiet, persistent reminder that life moves in cycles of storms and sunlight. Emma smiled to herself, imagining that perhaps, just perhaps, she had finally stepped into a new chapter and that someone named Luke had unknowingly become the reason. She was ready for it. Emma woke the next morning with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The air in her apartment smelled faintly of rain and fresh coffee she hadn't yet brewed. Outside, Portland glimmered under a soft, lingering drizzle. The streets, slick and quiet. Her heart skipped as she thought about seeing Luke again today. She didn't know why she felt this way, this mix of nervousness and excitement, but she couldn't deny it. There was something about him that made the world feel warmer, even in gray light and rainy streets. When she opened her door to take out the trash, she found him already there, holding an umbrella over a small box he was struggling to carry. Luke's eyes lit up when he saw her, and he offered her a hand to help. "Thanks again," he said, adjusting the box. "I didn't realize moving would require so many trips." Emma smiled, feeling her chest tighten in a good way. "It's Portland. You'll get used to it," she teased softly. She took the box from him and felt their hands brush again briefly. Lightly, but it sent a shiver down her spine. They walked together to his apartment across the hall, carrying the box and chatting about the easiest routes in the building, the best local cafes, and the occasional joke about getting lost in their own hallway. Emma felt her chest lift with every word. Luke's presence was easy to be around, as if he had been part of her life for years. Though they had only met recently, once the box was safely inside, Luke gestured toward his tiny balcony. "I like to think the rain smells better from here. You want to see." Emma nodded, following him outside. The city spread beneath them, gray and glimmering, streets wet and reflecting the muted light. A soft breeze carried the scent of rain and earth. Luke leaned on the railing, hands folded. He didn't speak immediately, just let the quiet wash over them. "It's peaceful, isn't it?" he said finally. "Even on gray days, there's something calm about it. You notice things you usually miss?" Emma nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. I think I understand what you mean," she said softly. "Sometimes I feel like I've been waiting for something without knowing what it was." Luke turned toward her, his expression gentle. "Maybe waiting isn't so bad if it prepares you for the right moment, or the right person." His voice carried a warmth she couldn't ignore. For a moment, they simply watched the rain. The city moving slowly below, their shared silence speaking more than words could. Emma felt an unfamiliar comfort. A sense that this connection, small but growing, was exactly what she had been missing. Over the next few days, their friendship deepened naturally. They started meeting outside the building, grabbing coffee together, or stopping at the bookstore to discuss books they had both read. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in years, feeling lighter and more present with each encounter. She realized that Luke's attention wasn't demanding. It was gentle, considerate, and sincere. And slowly she noticed herself sharing pieces of herself she hadn't shared in a long time. Small dreams, past regrets, favorite memories. One evening, Luke suggested they visit a local art gallery opening. Emma hesitated at first. She hadn't gone out much lately, preferring the quiet of her apartment to the hum of social spaces. But there was something in Luke's encouraging smile that made her agree. The gallery was warm, filled with soft lights and quiet murmurs of people admiring paintings. Emma felt a twinge of nervousness, so many faces, so many strangers. But Luke stayed close beside her. He pointed out his favorite paintings, asking her opinion, teasing her gently when she struggled to pick a favorite. She felt herself relax, allowing the atmosphere to sink in, letting herself enjoy the night without fear or judgment. At one point, they lingered by a painting of a stormy ocean. Dark waves clashed against jagged rocks, and the sky above was heavy and gray, yet full of light breaking through clouds. Luke's voice was soft as he said, "Sometimes the storms make the calm moments feel even more alive. You notice the little things after being through something big." Emma looked at him, her heart pounding. "I think you're right," she whispered. She didn't need to explain more. The painting, the night, the quiet understanding between them said everything. She wanted to feel. After the gallery, they walked through the drizzle back toward their building. Emma noticed the lights reflecting in the wet streets, the city buzzing quietly around them. They didn't hold hands yet, but the closeness between them was unmistakable. A gentle tension that hummed in the space beside them. "Thanks for tonight," Emma said softly. I'm glad I came." Luke smiled, brushing a strand of damp hair from his forehead. "Me too. You make it better," he said simply. His words weren't over the top or dramatic, they were just true. And that truth resonated in Emma's chest like a small flame growing into warmth. Days turned into weeks, and the connection between them deepened. They shared lunches, went on walks through the nearby parks, and sometimes just lingered in each other's apartments talking about books, music, or life's little frustrations. Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't imagined possible. She told Luke about her quiet fears, the emptiness she had felt for months, and the longing for someone to share her days with. Luke listened, never interrupting, offering small reassurances that felt genuine rather than performative. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the city in shades of gold and pink, Luke suggested a spontaneous picnic in the nearby park. Emma hesitated. It wasn't something she usually did, but she agreed, swept up in the sense of adventure and trust she had built with him. They spread a blanket under a large oak tree, the air crisp and clean. Emma laughed when Luke struggled to open a bottle of sparkling water, and he laughed too. The sound light and infectious. "Why don't we do things like this more often?" Emma asked, leaning back against the blanket. Luke looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "I think we're just figuring it out. Life gets easier when you have someone to share it with." The words made Emma's chest swell. She realized that she hadn't felt this understood, this alive, in years. The loneliness that had hung over her like a shadow was slowly lifting, replaced by a quiet anticipation of what could be. What might come next? One evening, they stayed up late, sitting on Emma's couch, sipping tea and watching the city lights flicker outside the window. The conversation drifted from trivial matters to deeper reflections, dreams, regrets, hopes for the future. Emma felt a warmth in her chest, a realization that life could feel this full, this vibrant. Even after months of quiet isolation, as they laughed over a shared joke, Luke's hand brushed hers. This time, neither of them pulled away. The touch lingered for a moment, a subtle acknowledgement of the connection that had been building quietly between them. Emma's heart raced, not in fear, but in something more exhilarating. The excitement of realizing she had finally found someone who understood her, someone whose presence alone made life brighter. The days that followed were filled with these small, meaningful moments. A shared coffee, a walk in the rain, a quiet evening listening to music. Each encounter deepened the bond, weaving their lives together in a pattern that felt natural and inevitable. Emma found herself anticipating their meetings, thinking of him during the quiet moments of her day, and smiling at the memory of his laugh or the gentleness in his eyes. One rainy afternoon, Emma returned from work to find Luke waiting outside her door. He had a small bouquet of wildflowers, slightly damp from the rain. "I thought you might like these," he said, offering them with a shy smile. Emma felt her throat tighten. It wasn't an extravagant gesture, but it carried sincerity and thoughtfulness that words couldn't capture. "They're beautiful," she said softly, accepting them. She placed them on the table and looked at him, realizing that something fundamental had shifted in her life. The loneliness that had been so constant was no longer the main character in her story. Someone had stepped in, gently, quietly, and changed the rhythm of her days. Weeks turned into months, and their relationship deepened naturally. They weren't rushing anything. There were no grand declarations, just small, meaningful gestures that built trust and intimacy. Emma realized she had begun to imagine a future where Luke was a constant presence, a partner in the quiet joys and challenges of life. One evening, as they walked home through the soft drizzle, Luke paused, glancing at her with a gentle intensity. "Emma," he said softly, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in mine, even if it's just for today or tomorrow or however long we can have." Emma's heart swelled with a mixture of relief, joy, and anticipation. She smiled, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. "I want that too," she whispered. They continued walking side by side through the city that had once felt so quiet and lonely to Emma. Now, with Luke beside her, every corner, every streetlight, every raindrop seemed filled with possibility. The stormy days of her past didn't feel heavy anymore. They had led her here, to this moment of quiet happiness, of gentle love, and the thrilling anticipation of what lay ahead. Emma knew one thing for certain: she was no longer alone. Someone had stepped into her life, bringing warmth, laughter, and connection. And with that someone, the world felt brighter, fuller, and infinitely more beautiful.